The first forbidden invention takes us deep into the heart of Nazi Germany, where engineers were constructing the largest artillery piece ever built by human hands. The Schwere Gustav railway gun was a monument to the German obsession with overwhelming firepower, measuring 155 feet in length and weighing a staggering 1,350 tons. This colossal weapon required its own railway system to move and took over a month to assemble with thousands of soldiers working around the clock. The Gustav gun fired 7-ton shells across distances of up to 30 miles with devastating accuracy. Each projectile was the size of a small automobile and carried enough explosive force to obliterate entire city blocks. When the gun was finally deployed against the Soviet fortress city of Sevastopol in 1942, the results were catastrophic. The massive shells penetrated through solid rock and reinforced concrete bunkers that were considered impenetrable, turning the supposedly unconquerable fortress into rubble within weeks. But the Gustav gun's power came with impossible logistical demands. Moving this mechanical monster required constructing dedicated railway lines and massive concrete foundations. The weapon consumed resources equivalent to fielding an entire armoured division, yet could only target fixed positions that engineers had months to prepare for. After Sevastopol fell, German commanders realized they had created a weapon too large and unwieldy for modern mobile warfare. The Gustav was disassembled and moved toward Leningrad for another siege that never materialized. As Soviet forces closed in, German engineers destroyed their creation rather than allow it to fall into enemy hands. The largest gun ever built fired its last shot and vanished into history, taking with it the engineering knowledge needed to construct such massive artillery pieces. Even more ambitious was the Vergeltungswaffe 3, or V3 supergun, designed to rain destruction on London from over 100 miles away. Hidden beneath the French countryside near Calais, German engineers were carving tunnels into chalk cliffs to house a battery of 25 gun barrels, each stretching 430 feet in length. The V3 operated on a revolutionary multi-chamber principle where secondary charges would accelerate shells to incredible velocities as they travelled down the barrel. The plan called for bombarding London with 310-pound shells at a rate of 600 rounds per hour, creating a constant rain of destruction that would make the city uninhabitable. Unlike the massive Gustav gun, the V3 was designed for sustained bombardment that could continue for months without interruption. German calculations suggested that continuous shelling would force Britain to negotiate peace rather than endure endless destruction of their capital city. Construction began in September 1943, with thousands of slave labourers digging tunnels and installing the complex firing mechanisms. The underground fortress was protected by massive concrete slabs designed to withstand direct hits from the largest Allied bombs. Engineers worked frantically to complete the installation before Allied forces could discover and destroy their secret weapon. But technical problems plagued the project from the beginning. Test firings revealed that the multi-chamber system was unreliable and often caused catastrophic barrel explosions. The complex firing sequence required precise timing that 1940s technology couldn't consistently achieve. When Allied bombers finally located the installation in 1944, they launched massive raids that collapsed tunnels and destroyed years of construction work. The V3 never fired a single shell at London. German forces abandoned the project as Allied armies advanced across France, leaving behind concrete ruins that would puzzle investigators for decades. The supergun that was designed to force Britain's surrender became another testament to German engineering ambition exceeding practical reality. Perhaps the most fantastical of all Nazi superweapon concepts was the Sun Gun, a space-based weapon that would have made science fiction seem conservative by comparison. Originally conceived by physicist Hermann Oberth in 1929, the Sun Gun evolved into a colossal orbital mirror designed to focus solar energy into a devastating heat beam capable of boiling oceans and incinerating entire cities. The weapon would consist of a massive space station positioned 5,100 miles above Earth, equipped with a 100-meter wide concave mirror made of metallic sodium. By focusing concentrated sunlight onto specific targets, the sun gun could generate temperatures exceeding those found on the surface of the sun. German scientists calculated that the focused solar energy could vaporize any target on Earth within minutes, making conventional defenses completely useless. Nazi engineers drew up detailed plans for launching the components into space using advanced rocket technology that wouldn't exist for decades. The space station would require a permanent crew and regular supply missions to maintain the delicate mirror systems needed for accurate targeting. Once operational, the sun gun would give Germany absolute power over every nation on Earth. When Allied interrogators questioned German scientists after the war, they discovered that Nazi researchers had seriously studied the technical requirements for orbital weapons. However, the scientists admitted that constructing the sun gun would require technological advances that were 50 to 100 years beyond current capabilities. The project remained trapped in theoretical planning stages, while more practical weapons received priority for development. The sun gun represented the ultimate expression of Nazi technological ambition, unconstrained by practical limitations. While other superweapons pushed the boundaries of conventional engineering, this orbital weapon demanded advances in rocketry, material science, and space technology that wouldn't emerge until the space age began decades later. Meanwhile, Allied forces were developing their own collection of bizarre and forbidden weapons that challenged conventional thinking about warfare. The British Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development created some of the most unusual military devices ever conceived, including the infamous panjandrum that defied both logic and physics in equal measure. The panjandrum consisted of two rocket-propelled wheels, each 10 feet in diameter, connected by a cylinder packed with explosives. This mechanical monster was designed to roll up invasion beaches at high speed and blast holes through Hitler's Atlantic Wall fortifications. The concept seemed brilliant in theory, providing a way to breach massive concrete barriers without exposing soldiers to devastating defensive fire. Testing revealed the panjandrum to be an absolute nightmare of unpredictable destruction. During demonstrations on British beaches, the rockets attached to the wheels would randomly detach or explode at the wrong moments, sending the 10-foot wheels careening in completely random directions. Military observers watched in horror as the device spun wildly across the sand, chasing terrified engineers and nearly crushing spectators who had come to witness what they expected would be a revolutionary breakthrough. The final test proved so catastrophic that British officials immediately classified the project as too dangerous to continue. One wheel broke free and rolled toward a group of high-ranking military commanders who scattered in panic as the rocket-powered disc pursued them across the beach. Another test saw the panjandrum suddenly reverse direction and charge back toward the launching crew, forcing everyone to dive for cover as explosives detonated randomly around the testing area. Despite months of modifications and engineering adjustments, the panjandrum remained completely uncontrollable. The British military realized they had created a weapon more dangerous to their own forces than to the enemy. The project was quietly abandoned, with all prototypes destroyed and documentation classified to prevent other nations from attempting similar designs. But perhaps the most innovative Allied weapon concept emerged from the brilliant mind of Geoffrey Pike, who proposed constructing aircraft carriers from a revolutionary material he called pykrete. This substance, created by mixing ice with wood pulp fibers, produced a composite material stronger than concrete and capable of withstanding direct torpedo hits without sustaining critical damage. Project Habakkuk called for building floating fortresses over a mile long and weighing 2.2 million tons each. These ice ships would patrol the Atlantic Ocean, providing mobile air bases that could launch fighter aircraft and bombers from any location. The hulls would be thick enough to absorb multiple torpedo impacts, while any damage could be quickly repaired by simply adding more ice and wood pulp to the affected areas. British engineers constructed a 1,000-ton prototype on a lake in Alberta, Canada, demonstrating that pykrete carriers were technically feasible. The test vessel proved remarkably durable, with machine gun fire and small explosives failing to penetrate the frozen hull. Naval architects calculated that full-size pykrete carriers could operate in Arctic waters for months without significant melting, providing the Royal Navy with unsinkable platforms for projecting air power across the globe. However, the project required enormous refrigeration systems to maintain the hull integrity in warmer climates. The energy needed to keep a mile-long ice ship frozen in tropical waters would consume most of the vessel's power generation capacity, leaving insufficient electricity for aircraft operations and defensive systems. As conventional aircraft carriers proved their effectiveness, and long-range fuel tanks extended patrol aircraft capabilities, the ice fortress concept became obsolete before construction could begin. While the Allies pursued unconventional defensive strategies, Nazi Germany was developing tank designs so massive they challenged the fundamental principles of armoured warfare. The Panzer VIII Maus represented the ultimate expression of German heavy tank philosophy, weighing 188 tons and mounting armour thick enough to deflect any existing anti-tank weapon. Only 2 prototypes were completed before the war ended, but testing revealed catastrophic design flaws that made the Maus practically useless in combat. The enormous weight meant the tank could only achieve 12 miles per hour on level ground and couldn't cross any existing bridges in Europe. Engineers designed the Maus to drive underwater through rivers using a snorkel system, but the complex waterproofing required extensive preparation time that made river crossings tactically impossible. The tank's massive size made it an easy target for aircraft attacks, while its slow speed meant enemy forces could simply retreat faster than the Maus could advance. German tank crews discovered that the vehicle consumed enormous quantities of fuel and required constant mechanical maintenance that battlefield conditions couldn't support. The Maus proved that bigger wasn't necessarily better in armoured warfare. Even more ambitious was the proposed Landkreuzer P-1000 Rata, a 1,000-ton super-heavy tank that would have dwarfed the already massive Maus. This mobile fortress was designed to mount naval artillery pieces and carry enough ammunition to level entire towns. The Rata would have required custom-built railway cars for transportation and specialized roads capable of supporting its incredible weight. Engineering studies revealed that the P-1000 was physically impossible to construct with available technology. The tank would have been too large to maneuver in combat, too slow to avoid enemy fire, and too heavy for any existing infrastructure to support. German engineers quietly abandoned the concept when they realized that such massive vehicles would be more hindrance than help on the battlefield. Meanwhile, in the Pacific Theater, Japanese engineers were developing weapons that challenged conventional thinking about aerial warfare. The Oka flying bomb represented the logical evolution of kamikaze tactics, combining human guidance systems with rocket propulsion to create the most accurate guided missiles of the war. These piloted bombs were launched from carrier aircraft 50 miles from their targets, then guided by volunteer pilots who locked themselves into cockpits designed never to open again. The Oka could reach speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour in its final dive, making interception virtually impossible with existing fighter aircraft. When these weapons found their targets, the results were devastating enough to sink destroyers and cripple battleships. American forces developed specific tactics for countering Oka attacks, focusing on destroying the carrier aircraft before they could launch their deadly cargo. The vulnerability of the slow, heavily loaded bombers carrying Oka units made the weapon system ineffective against prepared defenses. Japanese forces found themselves losing irreplaceable pilots and aircraft to deliver attacks that rarely reached their intended targets. The most disturbing Japanese weapons program operated in complete secrecy within the remote facilities of Unit 731, where military researchers developed biological weapons designed to spread disease and death across entire continents. These scientists cultivated plague, anthrax, cholera, and other deadly pathogens, while testing delivery systems that could infect millions of people simultaneously. Japanese biological warfare units successfully deployed these weapons against Chinese civilian populations, demonstrating their effectiveness in real combat conditions. Military planners developed strategies for using kamikaze aircraft to deliver disease-carrying insects over American cities, particularly targeting San Diego with plague-infected fleas that would establish permanent epidemic zones along the Pacific coast. The biological weapons program represented warfare's darkest evolution, where human suffering became a strategic objective rather than an unfortunate consequence. Unit 731's research violated every principle of medical ethics and international law, yet continued operating until Japan's surrender ended their horrific experiments. As the war reached its conclusion, many of these forbidden inventions were deliberately destroyed or hidden to prevent their proliferation. The knowledge gained from developing superweapons, biological agents, and experimental technologies was too dangerous to allow unrestricted access. But perhaps the most mysterious and controversial of all Nazi secret projects remains shrouded in speculation and deliberate misinformation. Die Glocke, or the Bell, allegedly represented Nazi Germany's attempt to manipulate the fundamental forces of physics themselves. According to fragmentary accounts that surfaced decades after the war, this device consisted of a bell-shaped chamber containing unknown radioactive materials that rotated at incredible speeds to produce effects that defied conventional scientific understanding. Polish investigator Igor Witkowski claimed that Die Glocke experiments involved a mysterious substance called Serum 525, possibly an irradiated form of mercury that created plasma fields capable of distorting space and time around the device. Test subjects and equipment placed near the operating bell allegedly experienced rapid aging, cellular breakdown, and complete molecular disintegration within minutes of exposure to whatever forces the machine generated. The few surviving documents suggest that Nazi scientists were attempting to harness anti-gravitational effects or create some form of temporal manipulation device. Witnesses described seeing objects levitate near the bell during operation, while organic materials would crystallize and crumble when exposed to the machine's energy field. The research facility where these experiments took place was reportedly staffed by Germany's most brilliant physicists, working under conditions of absolute secrecy. However, mainstream historians dismiss most claims about Die Glocke as elaborate fiction created by combining wartime rumors with post-war science fiction speculation. The alleged physics violations described by witnesses remain impossible according to current scientific understanding, while no concrete physical evidence of the device has ever been recovered. Whether Die Glocke represented genuine breakthrough research or simply wartime propaganda designed to intimidate enemies may never be definitively determined. What's certain is that Nazi Germany invested enormous resources in experimental technologies that pushed far beyond conventional weapons development. The regime's willingness to pursue seemingly impossible projects reflected both their desperation as the war turned against them and their belief that revolutionary breakthroughs could still achieve victory through technological supremacy. Across the Pacific, Japanese military engineers were developing their own collection of unconventional weapons that demonstrated remarkable innovation despite limited resources. The balloon bomb campaign of 1944 and 1945 represented one of history's first intercontinental attacks, using high-altitude jet streams to carry explosive devices across thousands of miles of ocean. Japanese meteorologists had discovered the powerful air currents flowing from Asia toward North America at altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet. By releasing hydrogen balloons equipped with incendiary and anti-personnel bombs into these jet streams, Japanese forces could strike directly at the American mainland using technology that required no advanced materials or complex manufacturing. Over 9,000 balloon bombs were launched between November 1944 and April 1945, carrying either 15-kilogram anti-personnel devices or 12-kilogram incendiary bombs designed to start forest fires across the Pacific Northwest. The balloons were constructed from specially treated paper that could withstand extreme temperature variations and equipped with altitude control systems that prevented them from flying too high or too low during their trans-Pacific journey. The psychological impact was intended to be as important as the physical damage. Japanese planners hoped that random explosions across American territory would create panic and force the United States to divert resources from overseas operations to defend the homeland. However, American authorities implemented strict media censorship that prevented news of balloon bomb attacks from reaching the public, eliminating the psychological warfare effect that Japanese strategists had counted on. Only about 300 balloon bombs actually reached North America, with most falling harmlessly in remote wilderness areas. The sole casualties occurred when a family picnic in Oregon encountered an unexploded device, resulting in 6 deaths that remained classified until after the war ended. Despite launching thousands of balloons, the campaign achieved negligible military impact, while consuming resources that Japan's struggling war economy could barely afford. The balloon bomb project highlighted Japanese ingenuity in developing low-cost weapon systems that could strike across impossible distances. However, the random nature of balloon-delivered attacks made precise targeting impossible, limiting their effectiveness to psychological warfare that American censorship policies successfully neutralized. As both sides raced toward victory or defeat, the most significant forbidden invention remained hidden in the deserts of New Mexico, where American scientists were unlocking the fundamental forces that held atomic nuclei together. The Manhattan Project represented humanity's entry into an era where individual weapons could destroy entire cities and potentially end civilization itself. Unlike the exotic superweapons and experimental devices developed by other nations, nuclear weapons proved devastatingly practical and achievable with existing technology. The successful test of the Trinity device in July 1945 demonstrated that atomic physics could be weaponized with terrifying efficiency, producing explosive yields equivalent to thousands of tons of conventional explosives from devices small enough to fit aboard aircraft. The decision to use atomic weapons against Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended World War II, while simultaneously ushering in an age where total destruction of human civilization became a realistic possibility. Every other forbidden invention paled in comparison to weapons that could vaporize cities and poison vast areas with radioactive contamination lasting for decades. President Harry Truman's authorization to deploy nuclear weapons against Japan represented perhaps the most momentous decision in human history. The immediate deaths of over 200,000 people demonstrated atomic weapons' unprecedented destructive power, while the long-term radiation effects revealed consequences that would persist for generations. The nuclear age transformed international relations and military strategy in ways that conventional superweapons never could have achieved. Nations now possess the ability to inflict damage so catastrophic that warfare itself became an unacceptable option between nuclear-armed powers. The ultimate forbidden invention succeeded in ending one war while making future global conflicts potentially unsurvivable for human civilization. Yet even as nuclear weapons overshadowed all other military developments, many of the experimental technologies developed during World War II would eventually find peaceful applications that transformed modern life. Rocket technology, developed for V-2 missiles, evolved into space exploration programs that put humans on the moon. Radar systems created for air defense became essential tools for aviation safety and weather forecasting. Computer technology developed for calculating artillery trajectories and breaking enemy codes laid the foundation for the digital revolution that would reshape every aspect of human society. Medical advances driven by battlefield requirements led to antibiotics, blood transfusions, and surgical techniques that saved millions of lives in peacetime. The forbidden inventions of World War II reveal how desperate circumstances can accelerate technological development beyond normal boundaries. When survival itself depends on innovation, human ingenuity produces solutions that seem impossible until they suddenly become reality. The line between breakthrough and catastrophe often depends on wisdom in choosing which technologies deserve development and which are too dangerous for humanity to possess. These wartime innovations also demonstrate how scientific knowledge can be directed toward either creation or destruction, depending on the intentions of those who control it. The same nuclear physics that powers modern electrical grids can also fuel weapons of mass destruction. Biological research that develops life-saving medicines can be perverted into agents of mass death. Understanding these forbidden inventions helps us recognize that technological progress isn't automatically beneficial to human welfare. Each new capability requires careful consideration of its potential for both good and evil applications. The scientists and engineers who created World War II's most dangerous weapons often believed they were working to protect their nations and end human suffering. History's lesson is clear. The power to create carries with it the responsibility to choose wisely what should be created and what should remain forever forbidden. The knowledge gained from these forbidden weapons programs didn't simply disappear when the war ended. Instead, it was carefully harvested by the victorious powers in what became one of history's most systematic technology transfers. Operation Paperclip saw American forces racing to capture German scientists, research facilities, and technical documentation before Soviet forces could claim these valuable assets for themselves. Werner von Braun, the brilliant engineer behind the V-2 rocket program, found himself working for NASA instead of facing war crimes tribunals. His expertise in rocket propulsion became the foundation for America's space program, demonstrating how weapons technology could be redirected toward peaceful exploration. The same equations that guided missiles toward London eventually guided astronauts toward the moon. Soviet forces conducted their own systematic collection of German technological secrets, dismantling entire factories and relocating research teams to facilities behind the Iron Curtain. The competition to acquire Nazi scientific knowledge became one of the opening moves of the Cold War, as both superpowers recognized that technological supremacy would determine future global dominance. Japanese biological warfare research presented a more disturbing case of knowledge preservation. Unit 731's commanders negotiated immunity from prosecution by sharing their experimental data with American military researchers. The horrific human experiments conducted in Chinese prison camps provided medical information that couldn't be obtained through ethical research methods, creating a moral dilemma that haunted the scientific community for decades. This devil's bargain meant that some of humanity's darkest research continued influencing military planning long after the war ended. The biological weapons programs developed during World War II evolved into Cold War research that pushed even further beyond ethical boundaries. Knowledge gained through torture and murder became incorporated into defensive preparations against biological attacks. Meanwhile, the nuclear weapons program that had ended the war continued expanding at an alarming pace. The United States military immediately began developing more powerful atomic devices, seeking ways to increase destructive yields while reducing the size and weight of nuclear warheads. The goal was creating weapons that could be delivered by artillery shells, torpedoes, and even individual soldiers carrying portable nuclear devices. The Soviet Union's successful atomic test in 1949 triggered a nuclear arms race that made World War II's superweapon programs look restrained by comparison. Both superpowers pursued hydrogen bombs with yields measured in megatons rather than kilotons, creating weapons thousands of times more powerful than the devices that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Testing of these new nuclear weapons revealed environmental consequences that had never been considered during wartime development. Radioactive fallout contaminated vast areas downwind of test sites, poisoning livestock and exposing civilian populations to dangerous radiation levels. The true cost of nuclear weapons extended far beyond their immediate explosive effects. The psychological impact of possessing world-ending weapons transformed military strategy in fundamental ways. Traditional concepts of victory became meaningless when both sides could inflict total destruction on their enemies, regardless of conventional military outcomes. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction replaced battlefield tactics with calculations of acceptable casualty levels, measured in millions of deaths. This nuclear standoff created strange incentives for developing conventional superweapons that could achieve strategic objectives without triggering global thermonuclear war. Military planners on both sides pursued exotic technologies that might provide decisive advantages while avoiding the ultimate escalation that would destroy civilization itself. Chemical weapons development continued in secret facilities around the world. Building on research begun during World War II, nerve agents discovered by German scientists became the foundation for even more lethal compounds that could kill through skin contact or inhalation of microscopic quantities. These weapons offered the terrifying possibility of eliminating entire populations while leaving buildings and infrastructure intact. Biological weapons research expanded beyond bacterial and viral agents to include genetically modified organisms designed to target specific ethnic groups or agricultural crops. The potential for biological warfare to destroy food supplies and create artificial famines added new dimensions to strategic planning that made conventional military thinking obsolete. The development of intercontinental ballistic missiles solved delivery problems that had plagued World War II superweapon programs. No longer did massive guns require months of preparation or exotic aircraft need perfect weather conditions. Nuclear warheads could now reach any target on Earth within 30 minutes of launch, making defensive preparations largely meaningless. Satellite technology emerging from rocket research created global surveillance capabilities that eliminated the element of surprise from military planning. Every major military installation could be monitored continuously from space, while communication intercepts provided real-time intelligence about enemy intentions and capabilities. Computer technology originally developed for calculating missile trajectories evolved into weapon systems that could operate without human intervention. Automated defense systems, capable of detecting and engaging threats within seconds, raised disturbing questions about removing human judgment from decisions about life and death. The miniaturization of electronic components made possible by wartime research enabled the development of precision-guided weapons that could strike individual buildings from thousands of miles away. The massive artillery pieces and carpet bombing campaigns of World War II were replaced by surgical strikes that could eliminate specific targets while leaving surrounding areas untouched. These technological advances created new categories of forbidden weapons that pushed beyond anything imagined during World War II. Electromagnetic pulse devices could disable all electronic systems across entire regions without causing direct physical damage to human beings. Weather modification technology offered the possibility of weaponizing natural disasters to destroy enemy agriculture or transportation systems. Directed energy weapons using laser or microwave technology promised to deliver devastating attacks at the speed of light, making interception impossible with conventional defensive measures. These systems could blind pilots, disable satellites, or cook human tissue from miles away while leaving no physical evidence of their use. Nanotechnology research opened possibilities for molecular-scale weapons that could self-replicate and spread through enemy populations like artificial diseases. These microscopic machines could theoretically be programmed to target specific genetic markers or destroy particular types of materials, making detection and defense extremely difficult. Artificial intelligence development raised the specter of autonomous weapon systems that could hunt and kill human targets without requiring orders or oversight from military commanders. The prospect of machines making independent decisions about human life represented perhaps the most disturbing evolution of warfare since the development of nuclear weapons. Space-based weapons platforms finally made Hermann Oberth's orbital mirror concept technically feasible, though with far more sophisticated targeting and power systems than 1940s technology could have supported. Kinetic bombardment systems using tungsten rods dropped from orbit could deliver nuclear weapon-level destruction without radioactive contamination. Genetic warfare research pursued the development of biological agents that could target specific ethnic groups or even individual genetic profiles. The possibility of assassinating particular individuals through tailored pathogens or eliminating entire populations based on their DNA represented the ultimate expression of biological weapons technology. Psychological warfare evolved from simple propaganda to sophisticated mind control techniques using electromagnetic fields, subliminal messaging, and pharmaceutical agents. These weapons targeted human consciousness itself, potentially allowing enemies to be defeated without their awareness that an attack had even occurred. The accumulation of these forbidden technologies created a world where conventional military thinking became increasingly irrelevant. Traditional concepts of armies, navies, and air forces were overshadowed by capabilities that could reshape reality itself through manipulation of physics, biology, and human consciousness. International treaties attempted to control the spread of the most dangerous technologies, but verification and enforcement remained nearly impossible when weapons could be developed in civilian research facilities using dual-use technologies. The same laboratories developing medical treatments could easily shift to biological weapons research, while space exploration programs provided cover for orbital weapons development. The democratization of advanced technology through globalization meant that capabilities once restricted to major military powers became accessible to smaller nations and even non-state actors. Terrorist organizations gained access to technologies that could inflict damage, previously requiring the resources of entire governments. Intelligence agencies struggled to monitor research programs that could be disguised as legitimate scientific investigation. The boundary between defensive research and offensive weapons development became increasingly blurred as the same technologies served both purposes depending on how they were deployed. These 10 forbidden inventions from World War II remind us that humanity's greatest innovations often emerge from our darkest moments, from massive railway guns that could level fortresses to orbital weapons that existed only in blueprints. These technologies reveal how desperation drives innovation beyond all reasonable limits. The weapons that were built proved devastating yet impractical, while those that remained theoretical would have reshaped civilization itself. Today, as we stand on the threshold of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and quantum computing, the lessons of these forbidden inventions become more relevant than ever. The choice between creation and destruction remains ours to make. But history warns us that some knowledge is too dangerous to unleash upon the world.